Welcome to Coffee, Culture, and the Capital with Sophia and Greg.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are in full swing at the California State Capitol with bills being heard left and right, bills being killed, bills being passed, bills being amended. There is lots going on, and so we are going to chat with you guys all today about 3 different bills that were heard at the state capitol this week. We are going to be talking about adoption, some debates over adoption. We're going to be talking about porn websites and age verifications and consent in regards to that. It's going to be a bill that you guys are going to be shocked that is not already law. And so we're also going to dive into psychedelics. And psychedelics has been, honestly, a major fight at the Capitol for the past few years. There's been some different bills in regards to this, and that fight is here again this year. But with that, Greg, we had Assembly Bill AB 1453 by Assemblymember David Tongipa heard this week. And there was a lot of debate, conversation, all of that in the committee this week. It was in the Assembly Higher Education Committee. And so before we dive into all the conversation there, what is AB 1453?
Yeah, this was a bill that was sponsored by a group that that reached out to us. We met at a pro-life event, and it's called Unplanned Good, and they've been around for a while promoting adoption. And I'm not sure if you know this, but adoption rates are actually going down. Not as many people adopt their children out, and there are so many couples, up to 2 million couples that are eager to adopt infants here in the United States. And, the waiting list is super long. There are hardly any babies. For anybody who's been in the process, they know how hard it is to get an infant. And so part of the problem is most women do not know about what abortion is like. It's much different than it used to be. And so this bill was going to require that all college health centers provide information, comprehensive information about adoption when someone is test positive for having pregnancy, somebody was considering abortion. Make sure they have the information, right? It's not. It was supposed to be neutral, right? Because here in California, they promote abortion ad nauseum. That seems to be the only option that they make the easiest as possible when someone finds themselves with an unplanned pregnancy. And so we wanted to promote adoption. And so that's generally what the bill was about. But we ran into some problems with Planned Parenthood, who I guess you shouldn't be surprised. They didn't like the bill. And they were there saying that they were against it, and you will see that they have a lot of persuasive power among the Democrats there here at the Capitol building.
And I just want to add in on that. Someone might be watching this and they're like, okay, if Planned Parenthood's getting involved, they're in opposition to this bill. Well, maybe because you're only talking about adoptions at Cal States and UCs, and maybe Planned Parenthood's coming in and they're saying, well, we're pro-choice. We want to make sure women know about all the choices. And I also want to state California Family Council is very clear. We are a pro-life organization from the moment of conception. But that's not the situation with what's happening with this bill. Right now in the state of California, all Cal States and all UCs already have to offer abortion by medication techniques as of January 1st, 2023. So it's not like this bill is coming in and saying, let's make sure women only hear about adoption. No, they're saying, let's make sure women also get to hear about adoption and get given a pamphlet and are told about it. And what's interesting, and we might get into this a little bit more, you might share some of this, Greg, about where the bill's currently at. But if Planned Parenthood was as pro-choice as they claim to be, they would be all for the choice of adoption, right? And making sure women get to know about adoption. And so I just want to really emphasize that as we talk about maybe some of the conversations that were had on this hearing, that this is pro-choice, making sure women know their choices. And it becomes evident who is truly just pro-abortion versus who is truly, let's make sure women have knowledge about more things than just abortion. But Greg, I want to get into those conversations and the discussions that were had on the committee. But I think before that, Assemblymember David Tongipa really broke down real quickly what this bill is actually saying. So let's hear what he has to say about this bill.
AB 1453 is a simple bill that ensures adoption-related resources are included at campus health centers. Let me be clear, this bill is not about taking away or discouraging access to any reproductive health service and doesn't prioritize one option over the other. It simply ensures that when a student walks into a campus clinic, they're empowered to make the best decision with clarity, confidence, and complete knowledge of what's.
So he breaks it down. It just makes sure these women know about adoption.
Right. So, I mean, the controversy, at least you'll see the debate unfold, is exactly when will these women actually get the information? And there was concern among the Democrats, like towards the end of the hearing. We thought we went into this hearing with the chair of the committee saying, "Hey, we are for this bill." They offered amendments. They said that the only time the time that a woman will get this information is when she finds out she's pregnant or when she comes in for a consultation on abortion. And that's when she would make sure she has the information. Well, the opposition had a real problem with if a woman is coming in for an abortion consultation, they didn't want her to be handed information about adoption. And so that what seemed to be the hang up with some of the Democrats. And so at the very end, you have the chair, who's a Democrat, voting for the bill. You have the 3 Republicans voting for the bill. And then you had all the rest of the Democrats, all 5 of them, refuse to vote at all, which means in order to get a bill out of a committee, you have to have the majority vote yes. So if you get a bunch of people not voting, that'll sink your bill. They only needed 5 votes. And they would have won, and so they were short. And so the bill it didn't completely die. They gave it reconsideration, means it can come back with a new amendment, and they'll consider it again. But there was also another dynamic happening in the committee, and I know we have some video of that. But you know, one of the members of the committee said, "Well, Planned Parenthood is against it, so I'm against it." So it looks like this particular legislator was taking their marching orders from Planned Parenthood, even on the issue of adoption. And, you know, that sadly has a huge influence on legislators up here.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Assemblymember Corey Jackson, and he's the one assembly member who actually did put a no vote on this bill. And let's check out exactly what he had to say about Planned Parenthood.
Because I can't vote for this bill if Planned Parenthood is not being supportive of it. And so, unfortunately, I won't be able to support this bill.
All right, I can't vote for this bill because Planned Parenthood is not supportive of it. As far as I remember from 4th and 5th grade history classes, what I was taught was that our representatives are supposed to work for their constituents. They're supposed to work for us, by the people, for the people. Like, yet, Assemblymember Corey Jackson publicly admits that the reason he will be voting no on this bill, the reason he will not be supporting this bill, is because Planned Parenthood isn't supporting the bill. I'm just confused because shouldn't he be doing what his constituents want? Shouldn't he be doing what's best for his community? And yet he publicly admits, oh no, I'm just doing what Planned Parenthood says. I mean, I don't think that's a good look one bit.
No, you're right. Well, Planned Parenthood has a lot of influence because they endorse candidates. They give them money. They give them ratings every year. And, it's a badge of honor to get 100% rating from the Planned Parenthood. And so, if you don't vote the way they want, they are apt to give you a bad rating, a bad grade, and then, you're no longer one of their heroes. So he wants to be a Planned Parenthood hero.
And I do want to note, before he started talking about that, he started off when he asked to speak, he started off saying, "I probably shouldn't be making any comments on this because I'm a man." I want to remind you guys all listening right now, this was not a bill that had to do with abortion or anything like that. This bill is specifically on making sure college students receive information or can receive information from their health centers about adoption. And yet, this is what Assemblymember Corey Jackson started with saying.
Mr. Chair, first, as a male, I don't believe I have any business dealing with this issue.
So apparently Corey Jackson, Assemblymember Jackson, doesn't think males should have they don't have any business dealing with adoption and speaking out on adoption. And then you saw a new assembly member, Assemblywoman Rodriguez. If you're just listening in, if you're not watching in that clip, when he said, "I don't have any business as a man talking about this issue," she snapped in agreement, basically saying, "Yes, men, don't you shut up and be quiet in regards to adoption." And obviously they're talking more so about abortion, but this bill was about adoption. And so whether it is about abortion, adoption, whatever it is, every man has a say in it. I mean, when it comes to creating babies, it takes a male and a female to create a baby. We all know how the birds and the bees work. But it also, when it comes to adoption, I mean, I think about all the adoptive fathers out there, the disrespect to say men shouldn't have a say on this. I think about all the adopted kids that have a great adopted father, and the disrespect to say men shouldn't have a say on this stuff. Like, it's just beyond me. And then for Assemblywoman Rodriguez to snap in agreement is just honestly disturbing.
All right. Yeah, it is an argument you see advocated up here at the Capitol. They want to discourage men from having any say on issues related to women's reproduction, right? Although Corey Jackson represents a lot of men and women, so he's up here representing their interests. So, he's not going to say anything. He's not going to act. I'm sure he's very supportive of all the abortion bills that come forward, right? And so you're taking an opinion on that. So it doesn't. It's an emotional argument to make people shut up. You're the wrong sex, so shut up. Like you don't have an opinion. You don't look the part. So we all have to ignore that. Men need to be speaking up about these issues just like on every issue. And women need to be speaking up on all. There's no issues women should not be speaking up on, right? Even if it doesn't particularly involve women. Like, come on, we can put aside our biases and do what's best for both sexes.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny when he says, as a man, I shouldn't be talking about this. Oh, so we all of a sudden know what a male and female is again? Interesting. Like,
what is a man? They should have asked.
I know, it's beyond me. They love to forget what a male and female is when it helps their narrative, and they love to remember it when it helps their narrative.
Yeah, I was told that men can get pregnant.
Yeah, we have heard that at the state capitol. Period.
Weren't you in a hearing where they were telling men need tampons on some in prison and in bathrooms, right? Didn't they tell you that?
Yeah, so if anything, he should have more of a say when they believe men can get pregnant. It's the hypocrisy there is just insane. But so that bill, even though it didn't pass on, Assemblymember Tangipa Greg, like you said, he asked a vote for it to be reconsidered. They did vote for it to be reconsidered. So now there's just some behind the scenes movement going on. And once that gets a hearing and a committee and all that, we'll make sure you guys know so you can call in and urge a yes vote. But with that, we also have a bill. This is a good bill that we've seen happen. It's AB 392 by Assemblywoman Diane Dixon. And so this bill, again, this was the bill I mentioned at the beginning that you would be shocked that this already isn't a piece of legislation. It's not already law, but what it does is it's making sure that pornographic website operators take the steps to verify the age and consent of all the individuals that are on their platforms, that are put on their platforms. I'm sure many of you guys know, we've talked about this with other pieces of legislation about the fact that there are a lot of people that are on porn websites that are actually, their content is on it and they either didn't consent to being on it or they're minors. That's where we see a lot of sex trafficking, human trafficking, and all that come up. So in this bill, they have to submit a sworn statement confirming that the individuals are 18 and consented to both being filmed and the public distribution of the content, as well as the bill requires prompt removal. So within 48 hours, the content has to be removed if there's verified reports that the content was non-consensual or involved a minor. So Greg, this is a good bill we see going through. And what did we see kind of go down in this committee hearing for this bill?
Well, you saw some powerful testimony, horrific testimony of what some parents are dealing with, having their child on these websites and can't get their child's pictures off. People who were stuck, unable to get the compliance of these websites to take down this content that they never submitted to, right? And this kind of stuff is out there. It's damaging. Not only to the people being exposed, but the people watching it. So we need to be clamping down on these websites. Last year we had a bill to clamp down on these porn sites to make them verify the ages of people actually watching it. Right? It's technically, we don't want minors. Right? I mean, the freedom of speech, the First Amendment actually allows certain amount of pornography, types of pornography, but only for adults. But these websites are hooking kids at younger and younger ages. And so we had a bill last year, it died in the Senate, but there's moves around the country to make porn websites accountable for what they're putting out there and the harm they're causing. So this was a great way to expose these websites for the awful stuff they're doing and hold them accountable. So I was happy to see it.
Absolutely. And like you said, there was powerful testimony, and we have that here. So let's check that out.
Hi, my name is Udo Wallace. I'm an actress, activist, and survivor of the 2014 iCloud hack leak. My private photos and a video were stolen, leaked, and spread across the internet, and it destroyed my life. I spent over $1 million of my earnings trying to remove non-consensual content with zero support, not from family, friends, or nonprofits. Everyone watched me drown, and instead of handing me a rope, they just pushed my head down even further. When I was younger, I wasn't considered beautiful, but when I got older, suddenly people said I was. And apparently, that meant that I deserved to be exploited. Just existing made people want to destroy me, and this is happening to women everywhere. No matter how good we are, how many rules we follow, it's never enough, and we're tired. But what's happening to children is even more horrific. They're violating babies and toddlers and uploading those videos to adult sites. Parents are left to find the abuse of their own children online and relive that trauma just to try to get it taken down. Survivors live with that trauma and pain every single day, like it just happened all over again. Men are suffering in silence too. Many I've spoken to carry the shame of their exploitation alone. That kind of silence is ending lives. And current laws allows this kind of abuse to be uploaded. Now, what kind of sick laws allows this kind of abuse to be uploaded in the first place? And the biggest disappointment has been the nonprofits. I expected adult sites to be complicit, but not the organizations that claim to help. They re-exploit survivors, collect donations off of our stories, and then do nothing. I came from the entertainment industry, but the nonprofit world made Hollywood look kind. And now with AI, non-consensual content is being created from a single photo from your social media. No one is safe, and anyone can become the next victim. That's why we need the Protect Act. It's the only bill that blocks non-consensual content before it gets uploaded to adult sites. It requires age and consent verification so children, women, and men are protected before the damage is done. The adult sites already have this technology. They're just not required by law to use it. I have over 10 million followers, but at the last hearing when the Protect Act passed unanimously, it was the first time in my whole life that I truly felt heard and seen. And that's all survivors want, to be seen, to be heard, and to be protected. No more placeholder bills, no more performative activism. Pass the Protect Act now. It's common sense and it's long overdue. Thank you.
So she did a phenomenal job, a powerful testimony there. You
Right.
guys might have heard like the beep, beep, beep going off when listening to that because she hit over her 2-minute testimony. And normally it's just 2 minutes. And I'm glad that the chair continued to let her finish and share her story. You don't always see that happen. And so she did a phenomenal job. And luckily, Greg, we saw this bill. This was the Assembly Judiciary Committee it was being heard in. And we saw it pass 12-0. So it was bipartisan, passed through, which is great. It'll next head to the Assembly Appropriation Committee and hopefully the floor. And I would love to see this pass through with complete bipartisan vote on the Assembly floor as well.
Right. But just to warn you, the pornography industry is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Our bill to make pornography websites age verify their users passed with no votes in the Assembly. And then when it got to the Senate, they started amending it. And then it went to the Appropriations Committee, and they have something called a suspense file where they can stick a bill on in a particular group of bills, and then they can just let it sit there. And unless the committee votes to take it off, it can die, and no one has to vote no. So I do, I hope that's not what happens to this one. So we'll see. People got to speak up. And hold legislators accountable. We tried to. The Senate Appropriations Committee chair, Caballero, the Central Valley area, she's the one that killed it without voting no. And so she needs to be the one held accountable. So let's make sure she doesn't kill this bill.
Absolutely. And so the other bill hearing we heard this week that, Greg, you actually testified in was SB 751 by Senator Becker. And Greg, this is the bill that I mentioned in the beginning that is in regards to psychedelics. What is going on with SB 751?
California has been trying to legalize psychedelics in some form for the last, 3 or 4 years. It started out with Senator Weiner announcing that, he's ending the war on drugs, and the first, we already legalized marijuana, and we started out, legalizing it for medical use, right? Pseudo medical use, and then it moved on to now it's just legal for personal use. So the same type of playbook is being employed with legalizing psychedelics. So first he introduced a bill that was going to make it available for recreational use. That didn't pass. Then he started moving on to, well, let's legalize it for just for folks in a therapeutic environment, right? But this particular drug is a Schedule 1 drug that the federal government and even the state government has designated it as addictive and no medical use that any scientists have been able to find, right? And so that's been the designation for a very long time. And so, but California, he kept on introducing bills, and then we had Republicans starting to get involved. because out of a sympathy for veterans and first responders who have a very high rates of suicide, there are groups out there that are promoting the use of psychedelics to treat mental health issues. And there's a lot of money behind it. And so this particular bill is really setting up a pilot program for 5 different counties, but it's outside the typical system we have for approving drug safety. If you typically want to have a new drug, you think it's going to work great, but it has to go through safety protocols. And those safety protocols are set up by our federal system, the Food and Drug Administration. They have testing, a series of testing you have to go through to get these approved. And there's actually psychedelic research going on right now that the FDA is overseeing. But California thinks it's going too slow. And this particular bill is going to form its own system. And right, so, but the motivation among the authors, you got Becker. You also have Brian Jones, who is a Republican, who is the minority leader. And these 2 individuals are now promoting this particular bill out of concern that, they don't want veterans to have to go to Mexico to get psychedelics, and these veterans are saying this is the only thing that helps us, right? It's like the miracle drug. But I just to give you an idea, there is a lot of promotion going on for psychedelics. And I just want to read you some articles I popped up today to give you the other side.
And Greg, do you want, we have the testimony of those who testified in support. Do you want to let everyone hear before we?
Yeah, why don't we hear that first, and then because really, you hear these testimonies and you think, who would want to be against this, right?
Yes, yeah. So
So
the testimony in support from this week.
My name is Angela Graham. I'm a retired firefighter of almost 20 years and co-founder and executive director of the Siren Project. We are co-sponsoring this bill. We're a nonprofit funding and facilitating retreats in Mexico for first responders using entheogenic medicines, also known as psychedelics, to treat symptoms of post-traumatic stress. My husband and I started this after having to navigate the system in search of my own mental health treatment when all modalities had failed. Fortunately, we had a friend who was a veteran to help us connect with trustworthy providers. Soon after, I got on a plane to San Diego, met up with a group of strangers, and we smuggled ourselves across the border into Rosarito to do drugs. I had gotten to the point that I was having so many breakdowns and angry outbursts, I felt I needed to take extreme action to protect my son from all I was exposing him to. After my experience with these medicines, I was able to calm my anger and find peace like never before. Nothing had given me such immediate and comprehensive relief from my symptoms. I was finally able to be the mom my son deserves. Today, the fire service is more accepting of mental health issues than ever before. I personally had access to more therapy and therapeutic modalities in the last few years than when I started, yet suicide rates are climbing. The suicide rate for firefighters is 500% higher than it was 20 years ago. We are 3 times as likely to die by suicide than on duty activities. Not to mention the generational trauma being created and passed on. This is all despite more acceptance and available therapy. Clearly, what is legally available is not enough. Now, before we fall further behind, California needs to set the standard for safe, effective access to these crucial resources. These medicines may not be safe for everyone. It also takes a lot of work and support before and after a journey to see the benefits of these therapies. For these reasons, safeguards like medical screening and properly trained space holders are needed. This bill is not perfect, but is much needed step in the right direction. As we keep going back and forth over the details, people are waiting and suffering. Please show your support for all the first responders in your communities by supporting this bill, SB 751. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, Greg, so what are the studies you have and articles you have on this?
Right. I mean, you hear that and you think, why are we stopping these people, these obviously struggling folks who have found this miracle drug to help them. Why are we stopping? Why is this not legal, right? And so I just wanted to bring a perspective. If you haven't looked into psychedelics recently, we're talking magic mushrooms, LSD. They're called hallucinogens. They are drugs to make you hallucinate, and sometimes the hallucinations seem to have a positive effect on people, but other times they do not. And so I just want to read you some information to try and give you perspective on this particular drug and why the federal government still thinks it's a dangerous drug that they're not willing to prescribe to people for people with mental health issues, right? So here's from a website called Psychedelic Risks. And it says, there has been a surge of popular media coverage of psychedelic drugs and their healing potential, as well as billions of dollars in funding for psychedelic companies and retreats. However, there has been no public education on the risk of psychedelics. So the population is relying on overhyped media reports about the miraculous effects of these drugs, right? But there has been very little research on folks who have adverse experiences. So that's one of the problems. And then there's even less empirical research on what helps people who have bad experiences. Now, why is that? Well, it's partially because most of the research in the last 15 years has been funded and carried out by true believers in psychedelics' potential for healing humanity, right? In a recent poll from Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Safety, they surveyed over 200 people who are psychedelic users. 25% of those reported adverse events. Now, 61% of those respondents reported a physical adverse effect, most often related to their heart. 25% of those reported going to an emergency room or urgent care after taking psychedelics. 40% reported visual distortions that persisted after the drugs wore off. That was from one study. Now, this is an article I got that just came out last month. And it says, bad psychiatric trips linked to early death for some, in a study finds. And it says, Dr. Daniel Myran, a family and public health and preventive medicine physician and researcher from the University of Iowa in Ontario, he says this: we looked at those who had very severe adverse reactions to hallucinogens and needed emergency care at a hospital. And we found their risk of death at 2.6 times higher than a similar person without a hallucinogen emergency. He also said, this is another doctor from Wisconsin, a Dr. Charles Raisin. He said, he's a professor of psychology and human ecology at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine. And he said this: maybe 1 in 20 people report having ongoing difficulties they ascribe to the psychedelics. And here's a quote from him. A year later, they say, I had an experience that was so distressing that it messed up my ability to function, or alienated me from my family, or gave me post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And that kind of goes along with this other report that came out in November. Canadian researchers tracked more than 9.2 million people in Ontario over 13 years, finding that those with hallucinogen-related emergencies had a 3.5-fold increase in schizophrenia risk when taking into account their substance use and their mental health. And so that was just a cursory look at articles out there talking about the adverse effects of this drug. Now there was also, a couple years ago, a pretty famous story that made the New York Times when a pilot from Alaskan Airlines took magic mushrooms, and 2 days later, when he was on a plane, he was riding somewhere as a he wasn't co-piloting. He was just sitting in the seat that pilots can sit in, free to go places. And he reached up and yanked the plane's 2 fire suppressant handles designed to cut fuel supply and shut down both the engines. The pilots were able to wrestle him, but he went to court accused of trying to kill 82 people on the plane. And Mr. Emerson is interviewed in this story. He paints a terrifying picture of an hour-long fight where he was trying to overcome a growing conviction that he was only imagining the journey and needed to take drastic action to make the dream end. So 2 days later, he still thinks he's hallucinating. And so in order to break him out of this hallucination, he thought he'd bring the plane down and he would wake up. And so he pled not guilty, obviously, of killing these people. Instead, he said he was desperately trying to awaken from a hallucinogenic state that had consumed him since taking psychedelic mushrooms 2 days earlier. So, folks, we're not making up the risk of psychedelics and hallucinogens, right? And so California, why is it that if California really thinks, if people really think these drugs have potential for good, then send them through the same safety protocols that all other drugs go through. Why does psychedelics get some special treatment where California's going to take on the role of approving drugs and ignore all the safety regs that all the other drugs have to go through, right? This bill actually violates federal law. It's more or less acting like, hey, we're going to be our own country. We don't have to listen to the federal government anymore, and we're going to approve our own, we're going to create our own system where we're going to approve our own drugs. And the funny thing is that the bill says that that these pilot programs have to adhere to the strict FDA standards for research, right? So they're claiming they're going to follow the FDA research standards without actually having the FDA approve any of the studies. So we're really concerned about this bill, and I get how desperate people are for an answer to mental health issues. And that poor woman who testified, she's actually, she thinks she's helping folks, but she's not taking into account how many lives are ruined by these drugs. And so that's anytime you approve a drug, you compare the good effects with the bad effects. And if the bad effects are too high, you don't approve the drug, right? So, and that's what our government has a legitimate, our federal government has a legitimate role to protect people from drugs that do them harm. And so that's why we're going to continue to oppose this bill going forward. And I try and explain that in my own testimony, which we can watch now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, like you said, you testified in opposition as well and did a phenomenal job. So let's check that out.
Great. Chair and members, my name is Greg Burt with the California Family Council, here to express opposition to SB 751. Let me begin by affirming our deep respect for California's veterans and first responders. These men and women have sacrificed much for our public safety, and that's precisely why we are concerned about this bill. It proposes a state-run pilot program that would use these heroes as subjects in an experimental initiative centered on psilocybin, a powerful psychedelic listed, classified as a Schedule I drug under the federal law and state law, which means that it has no medical utility and a high potential for abuse. Now, why psilocybin has been designated as a breakthrough therapy by the Food and Drug Administration for certain conditions, this is not an endorsement. It's just a way to speed up research, not a substitute for full approval. In fact, the FDA's guidelines for psychedelics are just in draft form, highlighting how unsettled the regulatory landscape is. And yet, SB 751 moves forward without requiring FDA or Federal Drug Enforcement Administration oversight. It claims federal compliance, but mandates no actual review by those agencies. This sets up a troubling precedent for drug makers who may want to bypass established FDA safety standards and come to California for approval instead. And more concerning, the bill grants the California Health and Human Services Agency broad authority to create psilocybin service hubs in 5 counties with minimal detail on oversight or access. This isn't a limited trial, it simply lays the groundwork for commercialization. Veterans and first responders deserve better care rooted in science and not in politics. And we respectfully urge a no vote. Thank you.
Well, great job, Greg. I think you got the major points put across. There's a lot of learning, I think, to be done at the state capitol on this issue. But Greg, how did the hearing end in regards to votes for this bill?
Well, we had both Republicans, Valeras, I believe her name is, and Grove voted yes, along with several other Democrats. So the bill did pass. But we did have like 4 or 5 Democrats, including Senator Weber, who is a doctor, refused to vote yes on it. I know Senator Weber has had issues with previous bills legalizing psychedelics, and she even mentioned that. So, right. So, but it got 7 yes votes, enough to get out, with 4 people not voting. So, we need to continue to educate folks that if you really believe this drug is great, then it shouldn't get special permission. We should be a land of a country, a state of laws, and the federal government has the oversight over drug approval. It's not up to each individual state to decide which new drugs can go to market. And so we need to hold up for that. And there are studies right now going through the process. And so, stick to the process. What I really do fear is that they're trying to lay a groundwork so that California will have its own drug approval system, and it will be far less stringent than the federal version. Because ultimately, with Senator Wiener's goals of legalizing all drugs, he wants California to find a way to legalize all kinds of drugs that are dangerous under the guise that people are doing it anyway. So hopefully we can continue to fight this, and that people will stand up and say no.
Absolutely. And there is a ton more happening at the state capitol, not just those 3 pieces of bills. So if you want to keep up to date with all of the legislation we're watching, head to californiafamily.org. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can also check out our bill watch list, where you can see all the bills we're watching, whether we support or oppose, and where the bills currently are at. You can head to our action center at californiafamily.org to get some information on how to make phone calls about these bills, and follow us across all of our social media platforms to stay tuned with the bills, what is happening in the state of California, as well as to stay up to date with the events happening in California. And on that note, we have an event happening next week on the east side of the state capitol. On Thursday, May 1st, we are hosting a National Day of Prayer event from noon to 1 p.m. So again, that's at the state capitol. You can find out more information on that at californiafamily.org. But also, here is a little clip about it.
Hey everybody, it's Jonathan Keller.
And Sophia Lori.
We are both here from California Family Council, coming to you live from the California State Capitol, but the view's a little different than we normally see, right, Sophia?
Yes, normally we're on the west steps, so the opposite side of the Capitol. You can see the dome right there. We're on the east steps this time. This is where we're going to be hosting our National Day of Prayer event, because,
That's right.
Jonathan, what is unfortunately happening on the west steps?
Well, you're very familiar with the West Steps. Just a couple weeks ago, we did the huge California March for Life. It was amazing. So many of you joined us from across the state and even around the country. We were going to do that again for the National Day of Prayer on Thursday, May 1st, but we found out that the Satanic Temple of Northern California is hosting their National Day of Prayer observance, complete with what they say are speeches and rituals.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that they're planning to do all day during the National Day of Prayer. One of them is literally satanic booty shaking. That is on their list of things to do to whatever their quote-unquote worship music is. There is going to be a lot of anti-truth, anti-God things happening that day. So we are going to be here on the east side. We are going to be worshiping and praying on the National Day of Prayer. We're going to be praying over the state. We're going to be praying over the nation.
That's right.
We're going to be praying for all of you. So we hope that you join us here on the east side to pray.
It will be Thursday, May 1st at noon here in Sacramento. We've got a lot more details on our website. Go to californiafamily.org. Really hope you will join us either in person or if not, definitely in prayer Thursday, May 1st.
And we will see you guys all then.
So if you want to keep up to date with all the different events, all the different legislation, and what is happening on California, again, check out californiafamily.org, sign up for our newsletter, and tune in to all of our social media. But with that, we will see you guys all next time.